Good morning. We will call the November 14th, 2022 CRA meeting to order. I would ask if there are any amendments to the minutes of the October 17th, 2022 meeting.
Move to approve agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Are there any, I don't see any citizens in the audience. Any staff want to talk off? Okay. Item 4.1.
Approve revisions to the Business Renovation Grant Program for property owners and tenants to improve the visual appearance of commercial properties through exterior and interior improvements. Good morning, Matt Jackson, CRA Assistant Director. The purpose of this item is to request CRA trustee approval for revisions to the Business Renovation Grant Program. On August 15th, 2022, the CRA trustees approved the program to assist in the reduction of blight and encourage private investment in downtown. Post-approval property owners previously awarded grants expressed interest in applying for the grant, but could not do so due to the 5-year time limit. Staff agrees that a property owner previously awarded a grant but has not received funding should be allowable to apply for the business renovation grant. If approved for the business renovation grant, no other grant approvals are eligible for a 5-year period. The program description was also included revisions related to blighted buildings and buildings needing renovation, ensuring the grant is in line with the goals of the downtown redevelopment plan. Staff also recommends the addition of additional permanent improvements will be reviewed by CRA staff, as currently the list of allowable improvements is not exhaustive and restrictive. This time I can answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Jackson? Councilmember Teixeira.
I just wanted to go on record because there has been some confusion. So I have a few questions. Does this facade, or does this grant replace the facade grant?
That's a good question. What I'm doing right now with staff is looking at all of our grants that are active to ascertain whether or not we have grants that don't need to be there, that are obsolete. So no, this grant is not effectually taking the place of, but I will be coming before council with a comprehensive look at all of our grant programs, making suggested changes and removal of grants if they are obsolete.
And the exclusion of other grants, does that include the cafe grant, which is actual furniture for outside the building?
I don't believe so, but I can double check. I believe the way that one's written, that's exclusive of the other grants just due to the nature of the grant as well as the amount.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Vice Mayor.
Hi, Matt. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Bright and early. I had a couple of clarifications. The facade, no, my computer's just a little slow, but the mural grants, outside mural grants, can be on non-businesses, right? A church or a nonprofit can apply and get funding for those?
The mural grant is through culture with Chris Hubbard.
Okay,
We don't run the mural grants.
okay, all right,
I can find out information, I just don't know it off the top of my head.
okay. And then, so I had a conversation this weekend with Chrissy Bond, who runs St. Vincent de Paul. I mean,
Okay.
she and I, as you know, we work together on Paint Your Heart Out, so I was returning some things and talked to her. And they're in great need of some internal repairs. They have leaking roofs. They need some work in bathrooms, in the kitchen, and major areas. And because they're a nonprofit, right, they wouldn't qualify because under here we have all applications must meet the following criteria. Property must be a commercial or mixed-use property located within the CRA, and business tenants or property owners must possess a current City of Clearwater business tax receipt. She wasn't quite clear whether or not she has some kind of a business tax receipt. They are a nonprofit. But what's interesting to think about is this phrase at the first line, the subject property must be a commercial or mixed-use property located within the CRA. She does lease out space in that St. Vincent de Paul for another nonprofit. I think it's PERC. And so would that qualify her as being mixed use?
I'd say the best way is just let me research the property. Double check with planning, take a look and see if they have a beach yard, because I believe they do. I believe even nonprofits, from my time in planning, they were issued one, but that was, again, years ago. So let me look into that,
Okay.
and I'll be glad to do that.
Yeah, and I know, I think there are a number of nonprofits that are just desperate for any kind of funding anywhere. And I know this may be a bit of a stretch. I'm
Right.
thinking our ARPA bucket, $1 million that's undesignated, not arts and culture, not
Sure.
education. Although she could pull from an education perhaps with a STARS program. But I think we're in such, critical times that a lot of these nonprofits are looking anywhere and everywhere for whatever type of funding they might qualify for. So if we could get clarification on that, that would be great. And then the last part of this 4-page document, the second attachment on the agenda, says the grant process. Property owners or tenants first complete a grant application and all that business. And then you've got, if the application is approved by the CRA director, the applicant shall sign and complete a funding agreement. So does that mean those individual grants don't come before us for final approval? It's just going to be the director that'll approve everything? Okay. Okay. And then do we have a ledger where we see the exact amount of funding in each grant bucket here in the CRA?
So in our budget, we keep a ledger of how much is in there, who's applied, what funds are encumbered. We do keep that in our budget, yes.
Is that public facing?
It's available for public record, but it's not public facing.
Okay. Do you think it might be a good idea to have it, what would be the pros and cons of having it public facing so that downtown businesses that want to apply have an idea of how much is in here, and what are my different lanes or buckets of applying for grants?
That may be of limited value, but when people reach out to us, we tell them if there's available funds or not. And to find that information, it would take a direct link on a well-used website for someone to get right there, but then there's different grants in different areas. I think that would have limited use.
Okay.
Honestly.
I'd like to have that information on our monthly meetings. I think it's just as a touch point as we go along, how much is being utilized, and who's applied and received funding.
Okay,
Just to have an oversight.
sure.
Mr. Jennings and then Councilmember Albrecht.
I just wanted to, actually, the Vice Mayor mentioned the ARPA funds. I did want to just mention, I think that's probably the more appropriate bucket of funds for nonprofits to apply for.
Councilmember Albrecht.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. I've seen other applications for businesses, property owners, very complicated in the past, and I think this one was simplified and it's very easy to read and understand, so thank you for that.
That was the intent.
Councilmember Bunker.
I too was taken by the application form, really nicely done. And I fully support this change to the program. Outside of the people who've come to us to say, we don't want to use this other funding that we got, we want to apply for this. How's the interest been from businesses and owners?
We have multiple right now, so it's just waiting until this is adopted, and then as long as they haven't spent funds, terminate their existing grant agreement, and then move forward with another application based on available funds and the application requirements.
And how are we getting out the information to people who could apply?
Our fantastic staff who's in contact with our businesses on a weekly basis.
Thank you.
Matt, the more I looked at the actual funding levels, I was curious how the formula was derived, because the more the business owner spends as a percentage, the less the city participates.
There was
That seems a little odd to me.
So the way I formulated the grant agreement originally was similar to all the rest, where the first $25,000 is free money. However, if the project cost was $25,000 and a cent, then we only reimbursed for half the amount. So effectively, they'd get $12,499. And so, in discussion with staff, they recommended to make the grant more equitable across the entire spectrum of the grant, so it wasn't just up front in the beginning of the grant that we provide that matrix.
But I mean, I think we want greater transformation downtown,
Right?
and yet we're giving less to those who are spending more.
Well, I'm absolutely open,
We pay for everything up to $24,999,
right?
and then it's 60% between 25 and, let's call it 50. And then it goes from 60 to 50, and from 50 to 40, and 40 down to 30 if you're spending between 150 and 200.
Let's just make sure we're on the same page. So,
I'm on page 1.
oh, no, yes. If the cost of eligible improvements are between 50 and 99,000, they automatically get 39,998 plus 50% of the amount over 50,000.
Right.
So it's not just the 50.
Oh, I
Okay,
understand that.
all right.
It's still diminishing. I just wondered what the thought process was.
Like I said, the thought process was that the grant was effective at the front end, and at the front end of the grant at the $25,000 mark, and then maybe about $75,000 and over. But for those folks who had a project in the middle of that, then it wasn't worth as much to them. So it's just to make it equitable across the entire spectrum.
Okay. Any other questions? Do I have a motion to approve item 4.1?
Motion to approve item 4.1.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. 4.2.
Approve the proposed 2023 Community Redevelopment Agency Board meeting schedule and adopt resolution 22-04. The Community Redevelopment Agency staff has prepared the proposed meeting schedule for the calendar year 2023. The CRA board meeting will be held here in council chambers, and the meeting schedule will be posted on the CRA website. The separate meeting notices provided by the city clerk and noted on the city's website. If there's no action for the board to consider at a scheduled meeting, staff will recommend the meeting be canceled, and changes to the dates may be required to accommodate needs of board members and/or CRA staff. If there's a need for special meeting, CRA staff will notify the board. The meeting will be noticed by the city clerk's office as well as on the city website.
And we've got a couple changes for the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council.
Yep.
And we're going to have some afternoon meetings.
Correct. There's 4 afternoon meetings to accommodate schedules.
Anyone have an issue with the schedule? Yes.
I got a comment. So I'm thinking that, is it going to be maybe in April or May that the North Greenwood CRA comes on board?
I just talked to staff last week, and we're going before the Community Development Board, I believe in December, council in January, so I would imagine that I can double check on that, but yes, by April, that should be on board.
Okay,
I
so
would-
they'll just,
Oh, what?
I would just say that it will be dependent upon the county.
County.
Right.
Correct.
Once it goes through the
Yes.
council process.
Thank you for the clarification.
And then there's no more state approval. We're finished with the state?
It's my understanding is that just the county, once the county signs off, then we're,
Okay. And I would just, so, I mean, this is premature, but we'll have to be incorporating a separate CRA meeting for North Greenwood, right? Eventually, sometime next year.
Yes, unless we can fit them both into an 8 o'clock meeting. Yes, we will have to account for that. Absolutely.
Well, I would assume we're going to do them, not simultaneously, but one after the other.
Well, but I also think that, especially given the grassroots impetus of the North Greenwood CRA, we may want to have those CRA meetings in the evening when people in the community can attend, rather than 8 or 9 a.m. on a Monday morning. I mean, I think
Why would that be different than the downtown CRA?
I think when, ideally, our meetings are held in the evening when more people can come. I mean, I just think it's a better way to have residents attend. I mean, they're working, and so any and all meetings that we value highly, I think, should be held when people can most likely to attend. And
Most of the leaders in that CRA are retired. So, at least the leaders that have established the CRA at this point.
yeah.
I think your statement says that we don't care about the downtown CRA as much as that, which
No.
I find ironic.
I would
Absolutely.
argue that. I would say, the CRA for downtown is just as important, so. if we're gonna-
Absolutely. If we want to move this to the evening, I'm all for it. Absolutely all for it. I am for moving any meetings. Our
EAVs are at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. My Affordable Housing Neighborhood Advisory Board and the AHAC are at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. It's crickets out there. People don't attend when they're at 9, 10 a.m. in the morning on a weekday. However, when we had an affordable housing conference in North Greenwood on Wednesday, it was a Thursday night, it was a council meeting, because I went over there after the council meeting, and a Thursday night at 6:30, it was packed. And so people care. People will show up if it fits their schedule and they care about it. So it was not meant to disrespect the downtown CRA at all. But I just, and again, this is something for months down the line.
Do I have a motion to approve the schedule?
Move to approve item 4.2.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous.
There's a resolution.
We have a resolution.
Oh, go ahead.
It's resolution number 22-04, a resolution of the Community Redevelopment Agency of the City of Clearwater, Florida, adopting the CRA 2023 meeting schedule, providing an effective date.
And I
Motion to
move to
approve
approve, adopt a resolution 22-04.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 4.3.
Approve a second white box grant extension to Green Culture 2 LLC in an amount not to exceed $50,000 and authorize the appropriate officials to execute the same. So Green Culture 2 LLC executed a grant agreement with the CRA on June 16th for the property 2021 for the property located at 420 Cleveland Street to complete interior improvements. On June 15th, 2022, they received a 6-month grant extension, which will expire on December 15th, 2022, from the CRA staff to complete the project. Green Culture 2 requests an additional 12-month extension to complete the project. The reason for the additional 12-month request to do primarily kitchen equipment is on back order and will not be available before the grant extension expires. 2 partners left the business, leaving the business unable to manage the day-to-day logistics to open the business by the set timeline of June 2022. Staff recommends providing a second amendment to the grant to allow a new completion date of December 15th, 2023. This location and project are critical to attracting pedestrians to this area, generating a favorable new market downtown. It will also fill a persistently vacant site on Cleveland Street at the 400 block. This time I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Vice Mayor?
I just have one little request. When you talk about particular property, it would be helpful to me if there were a link or there was a photo visual of the front of the building, just so I get my bearings.
Sure.
Of which one it is.
Not a problem.
Another year seems excessive to me.
I appreciate that comment. They expect to be done first or second quarter next year. They're finalizing their building permit. I checked yesterday. They just didn't want to put in a request for 4 to 6 months, and for some unforeseen reason, that it gets delayed again, and then we're coming back before you all. So that's why we're requesting a year. But they do expect to be done much quicker.
I want to support some of these smaller businesses, but they're very disorganized. And I was talking to one of the other business owners who complained about our planning department, and that's in here too. Some of it's blamed upon our computer system and things going on during COVID. And yet, the JW Marriott just goes right on up, and these tiny little projects are taking forever.
Right.
It doesn't jive with me.
Part of that's due to, very familiar with the people who are contracted to do this work for the companies. Whether you're looking at a smaller business or you're working with someone who's worked with the city of Clearwater for years. So it's a lot, I know there's intricacies into our processes, but there's people who are very familiar with them and can move them through them just fine, but sometimes you hire someone who's not able to do that.
I'd prefer to do a 6-month extension, and if they need to come back, they can come back, but then we can at least assess what progress has been made. I think we need to put a little more pressure on some of these folks to get things done in a timely manner.
Okay.
That's my personal opinion. Councilmember Albrecht.
Yeah, I kind of had the same experience over a year ago with one person that's still trying to open a place. And, you know, when I contracted, when I was in business as a contractor, I went around the entire state of Florida, even out of Florida, to pull permits. And everywhere I went, everybody assumed that that's the way everybody did things, the way they did it. And they would be so completely different. And I know that for a fact, as you said, people, they come down, and it's not necessarily the fault of the building department, it's just we have a certain way of doing things, and people that do it over and over again know the path that they need to go to get, you know, to ring the bell at the end to get the permit. So one of the things that I've always said that, you know, when we used to have a waiting room with people would wait to, before really online went real popular, and a lot of these small businesses probably won't do it online, they'll probably go in and sit, but they ought to have a monitor up like a TV screen and kind of give a little primer on how to navigate through the building department. Largo had that years ago. I thought was very effective because it kind of tells you what you need to do first. You know, you need to go to zoning first. Then you go to other departments. And so I wouldn't lay it all on Clearwater Building Department. It's just people that are unfamiliar, and then, you know, they come from areas that it's a lot easier, let's say, to navigate, and they don't seem to understand they need to do it a certain way.
I'm not laying it at the feet of our building department. I just hear that from less experienced
I'm not accusing
folks.
you of that, but
Yeah.
I have said that before, that we
But
need to
that's
fix
in
some
their
things
narrative.
in there.
That's in their narrative.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Jennings?
Just to mention what Councilmember Albritton just said, we are planning regularly scheduled trainings for construction companies, developers, anyone else that has an interest in working with the city in terms of our process, and also ways in which to utilize the online services as well. So that all is in the planning stages right now. So,
Councilmember Bunker?
I'm not surprised that the Marriott Corporation would have the experience and the finances to be able to quickly get a project done if they desire to. And I think it is harder for small businesses that we want to help get up and running. And as far as 6 months, I can't believe it's the middle of November already. Time goes by pretty darn fast. So I don't have a problem with the year extension, although I completely understand the desire to say, okay, come on, let's get on it.
Councilmember Shea?
I was thinking the same thing. I think a year or more than a year, I think it's a lot. It doesn't serve as an incentive. That site has been empty for a long time, and it's right between Clear Sky and Tequila's, which is the busiest section of the 400 block, and so it's seen every day. So I would feel comfortable decreasing the timeline to 6 months as an incentive to get this done, because what is it, it's on the second year of it being empty?
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
With, debris and construction equipment visible from the window, and I think we've given ample time, and we need to offer incentive to speed it up.
Do you want to make a motion to that
Yes,
effect?
so I will make a motion to amend the grant to a 6-month timeline. Deadline.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, Mr. Jackson, anything else?
Yes, a few things to note. We have a CRA open house this Wednesday, 9 a.m. here in the chambers. And this is where we reach out to all the businesses, stakeholders in downtown, just to bring them together to talk about what the CRA has been doing, what they have been doing, and how we can help each other just continue to improve downtown. At next month's meeting, we're working to bring forward to you 306 South Washington. It's the 173 affordable housing unit, which we've discussed before, the trustees, but we're bringing the sale and development agreement before you at the December meeting. We just had the Market Marie here downtown Saturday for the first time, instead of at the corner of Woodland Court Street. And I came down just to check it out, and there was lots of folks. I don't have an official report on attendance, but I personally love that location much better. And then on November 19th, we have the Bottoms Up Block Party on the 500, 600 blocks of Cleveland, the Clearwater Arts Alliance Public Arts Walk, and November 26th starts the 4-week series of the Clearwater Jazz Wanderlust series, which we partnered with Clearwater Jazz for many years. And on November 30th, we have the Clearwater Tree Lighting Ceremony that made it through the tropical storm just fine, and that will be from 6 to 8:30. And then last, I'm very happy to announce, as you all know, December 5th, our new CRA director, Dr. J. Matthews, will be starting with us.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Came down to Market Marie too. It looked great.
Good.
All the vendors were happy.
Yes.
Really thrilled with that. And I think it's going to help everything else going on in
Correct.
downtown too. It doesn't separate the two activities, so I
Absolutely.
think it's a good move.
I agree.
Anything else for the good of the order, Mr. Jennings?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The mayor and I had a recent conversation concerning just kind of following up on the discussion that all of you just had about the number of grants and so forth that are outstanding in the CRA and the lack of progress. And so we would like to bring forward an item in December or January to provide an update on all of that, so we can attempt to expedite some of these projects or withdraw the funds from the support of the project. So if that's amenable to the trustees.
Yeah, I just think we need to hold people's feet to the fire, and, we're obligating these funds that could be used elsewhere. If there's a party that is ready to go and going to expend them and improve downtown, that's where the money ought to go.
Okay.
We have limited resources, and we need to be judicious with them. So, and I don't think it's a terrible message to send. Vice Mayor?
I had a couple of things. Do you want to address at all Kathy Flaherty's most recent photos that she sent of clearly an overflowing dumpster over a drain? What's going on there? Do you have any insight?
No, I did not. I was trying hard not to be silly. Add some humor. No, I'm not aware of that picture. I didn't see it. When was the email sent? Do you know if I was copied on it?
I'm not sure if you were copied. It was sent, I think, Friday or Saturday.
If I may,
Sure.
just that I think it's, probably the question is more appropriate to our code enforcement, just because, Matt is the assistant director of the CRA, would not
Okay,
have any kind of enforcement or so forth.
okay. I'm assuming things are going well with Kathy Ham and our street outreach?
I'll defer to City Manager. Have you any more discussion?
Yeah, it's actually going incredibly well, according to Police Chief. It was very advantageous for the city to be able to bring her on board in a full-time capacity. It's something that the chief really wanted to do, and I was very supportive of that. She is out and about doing what she does best, and in a full-time capacity. So she continues to do a fantastic job for the city with our most vulnerable citizens. So
Does funding for her come out of our CRA is part of our CRA budget going to fund some of her work?
no, it's out of the police department, exclusively out of the police department budget at this point.
Okay. Any updates on the development at that ground level of the Nolan? What is that called there? What is that whole construction called?
They have not provided any names, but yes, I talked to, well, the actual tenant names. I talked to the development team 2 weeks ago, and there were some issues with, so there's 3 separate areas. There's a coffee shop, and then there's a self-serve beer and wine area, and then there's a section, a scaled-down version of Armature Works, where you have different vendors which you can get your food and beverage from, as well as an interactive golf game, kind of like a Topgolf simulator. Besides the cafe, they're on point to finish up work second, third quarter next year, but they had issues with the cafe where they had some roof leaks, and they had to go back in and fix a lot of the structure. And so they're hoping it can still finish on time, but that's where they are with that.
So like a year and a half behind. I thought they were going to be finished like this summer, when we took that tour,
That is what they said. This is another example.
Absolutely.
I mean, wow.
It's been, what, 3 years since we've allocated that grant? 3 years, if not more?
That will-
I don't remember that date off the top of my head, but it's been too long.
I remember a year after that grant was allocated, I would look in and it was still dirt on the floor. And I just keep thinking, how could we have used those funds to other entities or other groups?
Well, but that's where I think I need a better
Better understanding, because you say we have those funds encumbered, but I have no concept of whether or not people are lined up
to get those funds. Are people waiting and we're telling them, sorry, we've already got the funds allocated? I don't know if we do have people knocking on our door for more funds.
We haven't turned anyone away. There's a chance with the business renovation grant that may happen, but I don't know of anyone that we've turned away.
Okay.
But we are trying to be more aggressive. I mean, there are museums and others that have expressed desire to be in the downtown. I know Councilmember Teixeira has had recent conversations, and so as the mayor just mentioned, this is kind of the example of why we need to have that discussion.
I was wondering if you could talk to us, and again, we've got time because we don't have a meeting till 9, but I'd like to understand a little bit the difference between the Salsa Fest and Sangria Fest. So I was at the Salsa Fest, which I believe is the one that we were there together,
Yes.
right? 3,000 plus people, just phenomenal event. And so if you could walk me through, I guess, about how was that promoted, who was in charge. I have a feeling a number of people not from Clearwater attended that one. I saw a lot of, I just have a sense a lot of people from Tampa and surrounding areas came to that, which is fantastic. I'll admit I did not go to the Sangria Fest, so I wasn't there to visually see, but, the reports were not as positive. So can you give an overview of the distinction and what we can do differently?
Well, and I talked to staff about this. I was very aware of the marketing, which was done by the vendor, the promoter, for both events. But I was much more aware of the marketing for the Salsa Fest. And I know there's a distinct following for that type of event.
So two different promoters.
Correct.
Did one receive,
More money? I mean, did they both get the same kind of resources, or?
I'd have to double check that number. I
Ms.
don't know that.
Costelli also has some insights on this because her and I talked about it.
oh,
Good morning, Joelle Costelli, Public Communications Director. Both of those had the city co-sponsored amount of coverage. The difference that you see with the Salsa Festival is that they have a radio station sponsor, which is a built-in promotions arm. So whenever you have people listening to that music, they're hearing the ads on the radio. That's a really big incentive and promotion partner that brings people. But the Sangria Festival, we put a lot of resources into. We did social media post, website, and so it was well promoted. There wasn't that promotion arm of a radio station, which I think is the difference. The Sangria Festival was also on the same day as two other big local wine festivals.
do you know the cost of that radio promotion? Like how much it would be? It would be interesting to know that, as we promote our events.
It's probably an in-kind thing that the event did.
Okay,
Like the radio station held the event,
okay,
and so they promoted their event.
It's just like when we have the Spanish Festival down in Coachman Park. They do an incredible job of promoting it. That's why. It's one of the largest festivals we have.
so what's our learning coming from the Sangria Fest?
Well, in discussions with special events, we consult with the event host and tell them, here's the things that we want to make sure that you're aware of. So there's these other two events that are happening. You guys are responsible for the majority of your promotions. We'll do our part and our co-sponsorship promotions, but we would really recommend you not to do it on a Saturday where there's two other large events going on where you may be vying for the same audience.
Okay.
Then at the end of the day, if they decide to hold their event, then it's their responsibility to promote it, and we'll do our co-sponsored agreement stuff.
And having done a lot of these, both on the public sector and the private sector, it really is on the organization that is sponsoring. I think the city does a fantastic job. I mean, I'm just looking at some of the social media posts that Joelle just mentioned that went out. So, it is advantageous to have a radio or television sponsor, but that's not for the city to provide. So I just want to make sure. I think our staff does a fantastic job in doing what we're asked to do, but in these type of situations, it's really on the organizing group.
Did the big cleanup have engagement with the CRA? Did we have cleanup teams in our CRA for the big cleanup that got kicked off last week?
The events that I was familiar with were for the Clearwater Memorial Causeway. I don't remember seeing one for the actual CRA area.
There were people down here this weekend.
Yes, Sunday morning,
Oh, good,
Okay.
big group.
good, okay. So this week, or a couple weeks ago, Mr. Jennings shared with us a link to a website from the Cleveland Street Alliance and the work they're doing on some of the older buildings. So who is the Cleveland Street Alliance, and do you have a relationship with them?
So we don't have a working relationship with them, but they're invited to our meetings. But that's part of the reason for these open house meetings, because there's so many different people who are interested in or vested in bettering downtown. They kind of have the same interest, but we're not working together.
Okay, so they haven't applied for any grants or anything like that, they're just down
Not
there?
that I know of, no.
Okay, and so then we have no sense of opening dates, targeted opening dates, or targeted tenants or anything for those buildings?
No.
Okay.
Well, I think I can speak to that a bit if you don't mind. So I have been in touch with a variety of individuals who, make up the Cleveland Street Alliance. They have submitted an application, building permit application, to the planning department. My understanding is it's in the final stages, that they responded to some questions last week from our planning department. And hopefully the telephone building will move forward, which is the building where the Dunkin' Donuts used to be, will move forward here in terms of the restoration of the building. Will move forward here shortly. I know that there is a broker, a retail broker in Tampa that is working with the group to seek tenants for these buildings.
Okay, we talked about the Market Marie moving to Station Square Park, and I did attend that on Saturday. It was fantastic. Some of the feedback, who is the organizer? I forget her name, but I know her, yeah. But anyway, I think she's been, again, I haven't worked with her. I just see her when I go to the Market Marie, which is pretty frequently, and try to help promote it. But I love that market. I think it's done great. It's grown. It's real friendly. We have a lot of local entrepreneurs that are there, and my conversation with her on Saturday is I asked about the traffic. Is it the same as it was out on Myrtle? Are you concerned at all? And she said it was kind of a slow start. She said one of the positives was I thought it would be logistically more difficult to set up down those streets versus you just park here and go over to the field. But she said actually it was a lot easier because you can roll all of your supplies, the vendors. So that was good. But one thing that would help, she said, was to have the electronic sign out there. And so I thought, she's quoted, she said it was about $1,000 to get the electronic sign. I don't know how many days that would be, but I think, in a sign of, collaboration and appreciation for the work she's done, it'd be nice to put the sign out there for a couple of months as we transition.
There's limitations as to what FDOT will allow you to put on State Road 60.
I was thinking like Myrtle. Like the market's right down here today. And even like a Thursday, Friday, Saturday morning and then be done. But I just.
I'm actually not aware that we charge for those signs, so I need to kind of
Okay.
check into that
Okay.
as a first step.
Okay,
And then appropriate locations that would be
Okay.
permissible.
okay. Well, it'd be great if we could just, yeah. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was that Hollow Queens market. Did you guys organize that or contract for that?
Well, they went through the DDB, the vendor did.
Okay.
But we worked with them to acquire funding. I unfortunately wasn't in town, I couldn't attend
Okay.
that.
That was really cute. Did you go to that?
Two other events at the
Oh.
same time.
Yeah, I popped in for a little. That was a busy day. That was that Moccasin Lake and the Phantom of the Opera and that thing. But the only feedback I have for the Hollow Queens market was, so this was women's market, and again, it was set up similar to the Market Marie this past weekend. A large number of vendors and locals, some women from Dunedin and Largo, and the feedback from there was that they felt, and I don't have a real concept, but the $50 fee to have your station there, I went by at 2:30, and there were a couple that said, I haven't made money yet. And so I don't know how that dollar amount is set, but if it's just a once a year thing, maybe we cut them a break or something, Or again, do we set that price?
We don't set that price, and the intent is, and staff and I were talking about this at our last meeting, when folks go to the DDB for things like the Market Marie, the first couple of years, the first few times, You want to help them out.
Absolutely.
To build a market. But then these vendors are receiving funds, the organizers are receiving funds from the vendors to be there.
Mm-hmm.
The intent is to get them up and running and then cut back that funding. So I absolutely appreciate what you're saying. And we can discuss that internally, discuss with the DVB if we want to allocate funding to offset the funds that these vendors are paying, but that's kind of the opposite direction. That's
Well,
what we're
and I
talking
think this, if this one's only going to be a once-a-year thing, I don't know if it is or
Right.
whatever, there's no opportunity to build it up.
Well, they themed it Halloween, but they do multiple markets a year.
Oh,
That was just the theme of that one, the actual organizer.
okay,
They have multiple markets per year.
okay.
All right. I want to give everybody a break before we start the work session, so anything else? All right. We will be back for the work session in about 15 minutes.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
How exciting.
All right. We will call the November 14th, 2022 work session to order. We are going to start with a very exciting swearing in of new officers. I will turn it over to Chief Slaughter.
Good morning, Dan Slaughter, Chief of Police. I'm excited to introduce you our next class of police recruits. Starting to my left is Andrew Billups. He graduated from Eugene Ashley High School and has attended Cape Fear Community College. He served as a deputy sheriff with the New Hanover County Sheriff in North Carolina from 2019 to 2022 before joining Clearwater Police Department. Renee Frias graduated from Westview High School in California and attended Miramar College. She served in the United States Marine Corps as a sergeant from 2013 to 2019, and then served as a police officer with the San Diego Police Department from 2021 to 2022 before coming to Clearwater. Brian Frost graduated from Bayside High School. He served in the United States Marine Corps as a motor transport operator from 2012 to 2018, and he served as a police officer with the Garner Police Department in North Carolina from 2020 to 2022, and the Raleigh Police Department from 2018 to 2020, and the Brevard County Sheriff's Department from 2016 to 2018. Devin Matheny graduated from Clinton High School in Iowa and attended Kirkwood Community College. Devin served in the United States Marine Corps as a motor transport operator from 2017 to 2019, and then he served as a police officer with the Largo Police Department from 2021 to 2022 before coming to the Clearwater Police Department. Lauren Morales graduated from Clarkston High School and earned an associate's degree from Rockland Community College. And Lauren served in the United States Marine Corps as a motor transport operator from 2017 to 2022. Lauren served as a police officer with the New York Police Department from 2019 to 2022. Matthew Peace graduated from Enfield High School and attended St. Petersburg College. Matthew served as a deputy sheriff with the Pasco Sheriff's Office from 2014 to 2022. He is also the grandson-in-law of Pete Fire, a retired police department detective and former FOP union president. He is currently wearing the collar brass that belonged to Pete Fire. Joel Stabliski graduated from St. Petersburg College from the Law Enforcement Academy in 2022, and he's earned a bachelor's degree from Kaiser University. And he previously served as an infantry paratrooper in the United States Army, where he was awarded the Purple Heart. And Kevin Ventura graduated from Pelham Preparatory Academy in New York and earned a Bachelor of Business Administration degree from Lehman College. He served as a police officer in New York Police Department from 2020 to 2022. And then Ryan Wall from the Tipperano in Ohio and attended Sinclair Community College. Ryan served as a police officer with the Piqua Police Department in Ohio before relocating to Clearwater. Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate the help. With your permission, Mayor, I would ask that you ask the clerk to swear them all in.
Let's call.
Raise your right hand. I state your name. I, Renee Frias. Do solemnly swear. That I will support, protect, and defend. The Constitution and government. Of the United States. And the state of Florida. And the charter and laws. Of the city of Clearwater. That I am duly qualified. To hold office. Under the charter and laws. Of the city of Clearwater. And that I will. Well and faithfully. Perform the duties. Of a police officer. In which now I'm about to enter.
Thank you, welcome.
Thank you, ma'am.
Congratulations. Be safe.
Thank you, welcome.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Welcome aboard. Be
Congratulations.
safe. Congratulations.
Welcome.
Oh, thanks so much.
Thank you, congratulations.
Congratulations. Be safe.
I know
Thank you,
Safe
congratulations.
out there.
Welcome.
Congratulations.
certificate new and.
Congratulations. Glad to have you.
Congratulations, welcome.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Well, we welcome you all and wish you a very safe and successful career here in Clearwater. Thank you, Chief. Item 3.1.
Approve the contract for purchase of real property by the City of Clearwater between the city and Palm Bluff Development Group.
Mr. Mahoney?
Morning, Council. Tom Mahoney, Engineering Department. Okay, this property was obtained by the city in December 28, 2018. It was acquired through a foreclosure. On June 15th of 22, an independent appraisal was performed by Jim Millspot and Associates, who determined the fair market value is $87,500. On August 18th in 2022, the City Council declared the property surplus through sale, through the bid, invitation to bid to sale to the highest bidder above the appraised value of $87,500. One bid was received in the amount of $201,000. So in accordance with the city charter, section 2.01, staff recommends the sale of this property to the successful bidder. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Councilmember Beckman?
I just had, to try to understand, so this property we acquired, and we have other properties that we acquire that we give to Habitat or affordable housing developers?
That's done through our housing department, so, yeah, we have. That I'm
Okay.
aware of.
So why wasn't this one put up that?
You'd have to ask housing, I guess.
Okay. Thanks.
Other questions? Consent?
Yes.
3.2.
Approve a professional service agreement and work order with Harvard Jolly.
Good morning, Jeremy Alshouse, Parking Manager. Before you is a professional service agreement and a work order for Harvard Jolly to design and be with us through the build process for a parking garage located at Pierce and South Osceola. Meant to be approximately 550 spaces. There's a representative from Harvard Jolly here. Between us, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Councilmember Teixeira?
So I was just thinking, as this parking structure, this area would be a great opportunity for using creativity to add to our resident stock. Being creative with that parking, would the council be able or willing to discuss some creative ways to add to the parking structure? Maybe a couple of floors and add some lofts, or using the front of the parking for micro apartments, that section facing Osceola. Just kind of, I want to hear some feedback from the council, whether you would like to entertain not giving up this great space to just parking, but use it creatively, in a creative way to add to the diversity of dwellings in downtown. And one of the things that comes to mind is lofts. That's such an urban thing to have. So I was just thinking, just to kind of take a breath before asking for a design of a parking lot, if there's interest from the council to look at creative ways to optimize that space.
I think Peace Memorial did not want the parking garage to be too high, was one of the things I recall. Is that not true, Mr. Margolis?
During discussions at Peace Memorial, like anything, they express their preferences, we express some of ours. The only restrictions in the contract, however, have to do with our providing certain parking spaces to them, as well as certain things that we're working with them on the design side of it. But I don't believe that's a contractual restriction at this point. It is something that they expressed as a little bit of a concern or preference when it comes to something that potentially will be dominating over their structure, but it's nothing in the contract at this point. So.
We have to have ground level retail, I believe, based upon the downtown plan. Is that?
That's correct.
Right.
Well, I'm not saying add 10 floors, maybe just 2 and have lofts, or just use the frontage to have micro apartments, which is the greatest trend for the Gen Zs and millennials, just to kind of add to the diversity of what's available and kind of just be creative with the use of that building. So I'm not necessarily asking to consider adding 5 or 6 floors, but just open the discussion to see if anyone's interested in looking at this.
Mr. Jennings, you had something to add?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. In the discussions I had with representatives from the church, they did indicate that they did not want residential housing as part of the parking structure. That was, while it's not memorialized in the agreement, that was something that they did indicate. So I just wanted to put that out there as you proceed with your discussion.
Vice Mayor?
I think it's an interesting idea, Lena. I mean, I think it's worth investigating. You know, you mentioned lofts as kind of being a trendy urban thing for a younger generation, or to add diversity of dwellings downtown in these micro apartments. And I would say, in coming off of the AHAC meetings, I mean, I'd be in support of looking at some unique possibilities with an eye towards more market or more affordable housing at 120% AMI, or between 80 and 120%, something like that. But, you know, I mean, I want to continue to push for that, and our AHAC is recommending that for all new developments. But I think it's worth a discussion, looking at some different, you know, configurations of other parking garages that have floors for micro living.
The only issue I've got is, you know, we're trying to add parking for Imagine Clearwater or other things, and, you know, there's 125 spaces, I believe, that are reserved on Sundays, and 17-ish during the week for staff from the church. But then if we put residential on top of it, then they're gonna need some of that parking that we're trying to build for Imagine Clearwater. That would be my reservation. I know there's interest in some other sites downtown for some additional residential. I think we may be creating something that's at odds with the solution that we're trying to produce, you know, for Imagine Clearwater and getting more parking. This is a pretty hefty price, and I'm sure the retail space adds to that. I mean, it's about $47,000 a space,
Yeah.
almost 48. Why are we not doing a design build? Was that discussed?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's a design build.
The way
I don't
that
know what that is.
the process just played out, we acquired the land, they wanted to design for a parking garage. We kind of started the process of looking into building a parking garage. How big of a space would fit, how big of a, you know, it really depends on the length and the width, depends on how many cars you can get in there. If you start taking away some of that for apartments or whatnot, it's 47 floors. I'm getting off your original question here, and I'll get back to that, but it's already 7 floors approximately, so you start adding apartments, it's gonna go up from there. But as far as why it was chose that way, I kinda got direction, so.
Mr. Jennings, can you answer that?
Yeah, it's something that, when I came to the city, that we have not utilized as much as what I utilized previously. And so I would say that is certainly something that I think we should be doing much more of. But on this particular case, it was not put out as a design build.
So it just, yeah.
Okay, a contractor designs and builds it, okay.
And Mr. Frslowski, you're in that crowd, do you think this is gonna be poured in place or precast, or from the dimensions that we have, what's gonna be the most cost effective?
Good morning, Mayor. Ward Frslowski with Harvard Jolly Architecture. That was going to be part of the study when we presented to be awarded the project. We talked about either precast or cast in place. They each have their advantages and disadvantages. Precast is a less expensive first cost, but then you have maintenance costs over time. Cast in place is more expensive first cost, but then you don't have as much maintenance costs over time. So as we discussed that in our presentation, and then in kind of negotiating this, we agreed that would be part of the discussion to get you the best value and take a look at that.
Okay. Other questions? Yes, Councilmember Albrecht.
Well, you pretty much covered it. I was just gonna say that it's gotta have to conform with the downtown development plan. It has to have retail or restaurant. The other thing I wanted to say that in a few years, we're gonna have the entire 500 block between Garden and Pierce, or Garden, Pierce, and Park. And I hope that we can do a development there with parking and maybe a P3 with somebody for living units and definitely retail restaurant there. But that's a great opportunity. It's a block away for development.
Councilmember Bunker?
And I love the ideas, and I hope that we implement them in other areas downtown. I'm not sure at this late date that we want to insist that this be done for this particular parking lot.
Mr. Delk, again, I understand the retail is in the downtown plan. And Mr. Jennings, at some point I'd like to have a discussion about it. We have a lot of retail downtown that is vacant. And I get a little bit concerned that we are mandating that we need more retail. And Ms. Clayton, jump in the water. It's fine, but I mean, we've had a lot of the retail at Water's Edge vacant since the building was opened. Some of it has been utilized, and then we've got numerous storefronts on Cleveland, and I just look at supply and demand. And certainly we hope with the Bluffs passing that that's going to be a catalyst. But are we going to, are we producing so much retail with our plan that we're not going to be able to absorb it? And ultimately then that hurts the buildings that already have retail to get occupancy.
What the downtown calls for are active uses. It is not retail per se. So I think the goal is to get something in the space.
Over to the mic a little more.
The goal is to get something in the space that will generate some kind of activity. It does not have to be, retail. For example, if an apartment building wanted to locate there, they could have their leasing office, their gym, whatever. So that there's just something active on the first floor. Cultural organizations, city functions, all those things would be allowed there. So I just want to clear up, doesn't have to be retail. We understand we cannot require retail all over downtown. It just won't work. So I just wanted to make sure that that was understood.
Is there some point though where we're creating a self-inflicted wound? Seriously, I mean, what studies are we doing to determine what the necessary amount of active storefronts?
Well, I think that these requirements go to creating an urban environment, a pedestrian environment, and they're not required necessarily on every single frontage. This is probably a frontage B, I think, which requires that level of activity, or if it had living units on the first floor, it would require a certain form there. We think it's a good thing to have a pedestrian area that has some interest so that when people are walking, it's not a dead zone. And, being only a block away from the main intersection, it seems to be an area that could support something that's more active. Retail, yeah, I understand your concern. But I think there are some spaces or some uses that could use that space that's not necessarily retail that could generate interest and activity along the street.
Well, it's beneficial to be modern. Maybe with higher ceilings and more flexibility, I get all that. Right. So, Mr. Frizlowski, are we going to have two options when you come back? Poured in place versus precast?
We are in the early.
Or are you going to pick one that you and staff believes is the best option?
What we will do is a study where we've got a cost estimator, and we'll talk with precasters and contractors, and then offer that option. But we'll do that pretty early on because it's not worth it to design both that way. So there'll be a point in time, typically at about schematic design, where we're going to put a lot of energy into looking at that, as well as different options on the decks. There's a lot of different variety, whether we do slope decks, flat decks, how we arrange it, what it looks like. We've been given a copy of your agreement with the church, so we understand there has to be the cooperation with the church, and, they're concerned about the aesthetics of the church, so we read all of that. So that will all be part of the early schematic design. And then once those decisions are made, we'd be happy to come back here at whatever time you want. Typically at schematic design, we'd be able to show you a site plan, floor plans, building elevations, renderings, and the price, and the systems. And then we would march forward with all the engineering. So you'd have a chance to, weigh in, obviously working closely with staff all along the way, to make sure that once those are locked in, then we move ahead with the engineering moving forward.
And what's our timeline?
We have roughly a year a little less than a year for design, a year for build, approximately.
Any other questions? Consent?
Yep.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
4.1.
Approve settlement of workers' compensation claims for payments of $120,000 to Jesse Myers.
Good morning, Monica Mitchell, Assistant Finance Director. This is a workers' comp settlement for a former police officer who was approved for a job-connected disability pension in March. He's currently treating for 2 separate injuries under workers' comp. This claim is a little bit less than the city's projected cost to continue treating him under workers' comp, and it affords him the opportunity to seek treatment in providers of his own choosing.
Any questions? Consent?
Yes.
Thank you. 5.1.
Approve the Second Amendment's lease agreement between Clearwater for Youth and the City of Clearwater.
Morning, Mayor, Council. Jim Hallius, Director, Parks and Recreation. The item that we have before you today is a second amendment to our lease agreement with CFY for certain office space at the Long Center. We amended this agreement last year. CFY required some additional office space that we were able to provide them. And in further discussions, new office space was needed for staff that CFY was bringing on. We had the space, and then we were more than happy to go ahead and amend the agreement to give that space over to them. And then additionally, for the sake of transparency, we've included in this agreement our annual purchase of 16 tickets for the banquet on the beach for the CFY banquet, and also 8 tickets for the scholarship breakfast. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Hallios? Consent? 6.1.
Approve the annexation initial future land use map designation of residential urban and the initial zoning atlas designation of low medium density residential for 3144 Johns Parkway.
Good morning, Dylan Prince, Planning and Development. This voluntary annexation petition involves a 0.187 acre property consisting of 1 parcel of land occupied by a detached dwelling. The property is located on the north side of Johns Parkway, approximately 615 feet east of South McMullen Booth Road. The applicant is requesting annexation in order to receive sanitary sewer and solid waste service from the city. The property is contiguous to existing city boundaries to the north, east, and west. It is proposed that the property be assigned a future land use map designation of residential urban and a zoning atlas designation of low medium density residential. The applicant has paid the required sewer impact fee in full and is aware of the additional costs to extend to the city sewer service to this property. Are there any questions?
Any questions? All right, 6.2.
Approve the annexation initial future land use map designation of residential low and initial zoning atlas designation of low medium density residential for 1200 Northwood Avenue.
Morning, Kyle Burlington, Planning and Development. This voluntary annexation petition involves a 0.264 acre parcel consisting of 1 parcel of land occupied by a detached dwelling. The applicant is requesting annexation in order to receive sanitary sewer and solid waste service from the city. The applicant has started a renovation of the property while in the county, and due to the nature of that renovation, Pinellas County has required the applicant to connect to the city's sanitary sewer system prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. And for that reason, the second reading of the annexation will be delayed until after we receive a copy of that CO. We have to answer any questions.
Any questions? 6.3.
Approve the annexation initial future land use map designations of commercial general and residential urban, and the initial zoning atlas designations of commercial and low medium density residential for 1718 North Betty Lane.
Dillon Prince Plan Development. This voluntary annexation petition involves a 2.15 acre property consisting of one parcel of vacant land. The property is located on the west side of North Betty Lane, approximately 500 feet north of Overbrook Avenue. The applicant, Habitat for Humanity of Pinellas County, plans to develop at least 11 detached dwellings. The applicant is requesting annexation in order to receive potable water, sanitary sewer, and solid waste service from the city upon availability of service and construction. The Development Review Committee is proposing that the 0.69 acres of abutting North Betty Lane right-of-way, not currently within the city limits, also be annexed. The property is contiguous to existing city boundaries to the west. It is proposed that the property be assigned future land use designations of commercial general and residential urban, and zoning atlas designations of commercial and low-medium density residential. The applicant is aware that the property owner is responsible for evaluating the proper method to connect to the city sewer system, as well for the additional cost to extend and connect to the sewer system and for upgrades to the existing system that may be necessary to receive additional wastewater flows. Are there any questions?
Any questions? So this site, do we know, is it contaminated? I mean, what its use has been?
Yeah, the auto salvage.
Yes.
I'm not 100% sure on that.
Okay. Nothing else? 6.4.
Council, 6.4, the applicant withdrew his request. It's on the agenda because it has been advertised and noticed.
All right. 6.5.
Approve the annexation initial future land use map designation of residential low and initial zoning atlas designation of low medium density residential for 3047 Terrace View Lane.
Thank you, Brotherton Planning and Development. This voluntary annexation petition involves a 0.184 acre property consisting of one parcel of land occupied by a detached dwelling. The applicant is requesting annexation in order to receive sanitary sewer and solid waste service from the city. And the applicant has paid the required city sewer impact fee in full and is aware of the additional costs to connect city sewer service to this property. And upon annexation, solid waste will be provided.
Any questions? 6.6.
Approve the annexation initial future land use map designations of residential low, water drainage feature and preservation, and initial zoning atlas designations of low medium density residential and preservation for 1276 South Belcher Road.
Dillon Prince Plan Development. This voluntary annexation petition involves a 4.76 acre property consisting of one parcel of land occupied by a detached dwelling. The property is located on the west side of South Belcher Road, approximately 500 feet north of Lakeview Road. The applicant is requesting annexation in order to receive sanitary sewer and solid waste service from the city. The property is contiguous to existing city boundaries to the north and west. It is proposed that the property be assigned future land use map designations of residential low, water drainage feature and preservation, and zoning atlas designations of low medium density residential and preservation. The applicant is aware that the city sewer impact and assessment fees must be paid in full prior to connection, and of the additional cost to extend city sewer service to the property.
Any questions? It's always been such an unusual property still sitting there on Belcher. That pond, does it represent about a third, a little under a third of the parcel?
I believe so. I think 2.49 acres is the buildable portion of the property, so about, I think, half or a third.
All right, we'll talk about that on Thursday, 6.7.
Approve the annexation initial future land use map designation of residential urban and initial zoning atlas designation of low medium density residential for 1282 Palm Street.
This voluntary annexation petition involves a 0.241 acre property consisting of one parcel of land occupied by a detached dwelling. The property is located on the northwest corner of Palm Street and North Betty Lane. The applicant is requesting annexation in order to receive sanitary sewer and solid waste service from the city. The Development Review Committee is proposing that the 0.30 acres of abutting North Betty Lane right-of-way, not currently within the city limits, also be annexed. The property is contiguous to existing city boundaries to the west. It is proposed that the property be assigned a future land use map designation of residential urban and a zoning atlas designation of low medium density residential. The applicant is aware that the city sewer impact and assessment fees must be paid in full prior to connection and of the additional cost to extend city sewer service to this property. Any questions?
Any questions? Thank you. 7.1.
Amend Clearwater Code of Ordinances, Chapter 33, adding subsections 14 through 18, establishing slow speed minimum wake zone along Stevenson's Creek.
Morning, Mayor, Council. This topic's been coming up with some regularity for a little bit of time now. After they dredged and improved Stevenson's Creek several years ago, it made it more attractive and passable to a number of vessels. We started getting complaints at the PD on occasion with personal watercraft and other vessels speeding through the creek. So when I moved over to Marine and Aviation, I started to pursue a path forward and still addressing those complaints that I know all of you in city management has been aware of. Started to see a proliferation of personal watercraft, and on weekends that became a popular area to go run your PWC through. So it's all culminated in a process, and this is the first step in the process of regulating that body of water, or at least specific areas of that body of water. I'll leave this up here for reference, but essentially there are two paths you can follow to enact an ordinance governing vessel speed. One is kind of like an FDOT model where you demonstrate crash data and enforcement data, of which we have none in the creek. The second path forward allows you to regulate it based on low and narrow bridge clearances and obstructions. So the upper portion is a narrow waterway, less than 75 feet from Douglas to Betty Lane, and then within 300 feet of the Betty Lane Bridge to the east, and then 300 feet west of Douglas, 300 feet either side of Pinellas Trail, and 300 feet either side of Fort Harrison. That's the most we'd be permitted to regulate based on the statute. The state and FWC interpret it exactly as written, and you must qualify based on those criteria. So we've surveyed it, we've drafted this ordinance, we have preliminary approval from the state. Once council approves an ordinance like this, then we start the application process. It goes back to the state. They then approve that ordinance, and then we go to FDEP, Coast Guard, Corps of Engineers, Pinellas County Waterways, and have to get everyone to sign off. So the passage of this ordinance today is merely the first step in the process. It's anticipated to take about 6 months or so to get the regulatory sign-offs, and then we can move forward with the actual installation of the slow speed markers. Have any questions?
Any questions? Councilmember Albrecht.
All right, I remember this coming to us a while back. There was somebody that was speeding around in there and people were complaining. Is that still happening, or did somebody, is he still speeding around in there?
I think they've addressed it with that individual, but this kind of, so once they dredged it and they started making improvements, a lot of folks have put additional houses in there and fixed them up and cleared a lot of the vegetation so that they can see the waterway, and it's become more apparent that it's been used primarily by personal watercraft, but it still gets some vessels speeding through there, and I get some regular complaints, as does the PD.
Do you know what the dock or the bridge clearance height is there? Because
I don't
pretty
know.
low.
We surveyed it. It's got to be less than 25 feet, less than 100 feet wide, and they all meet that criteria. I know that you can't get under the Fort Harrison Bridge with a center console vessel with the top up.
Right. So it's going to be a smaller boat that's...
Yes. Flats boats,
Yeah.
personal watercraft, little skiffs. But it's starting to see a lot of use by paddleboarders, kayakers, canoers, just because it is still shallow. Despite the fact that they dredged some of it, it's still shallow throughout that area. So, and that's come up before at Marine Advisory. We've had people inquiring, could we put a launch in somewhere in that area for paddleboards and kayaks and canoes. So that may come before you at some point.
In the park, off the park there, that's...
Yes, there have been some suggestions to that effect. I just haven't evaluated it further, hasn't come before you yet.
I'm fine with this. I mean, it doesn't say no wake, it's just slow,
Slow speed.
minimum wake,
Correct.
so, okay.
Other questions, comments? Thank you for moving this forward. I know it's never easy, so
I thought I was
appreciate
just going to
your
put a few
efforts.
buoys in and move on.
Never that easy. All right, any questions on second readings, 8.1? Any city manager verbal reports?
Just to thank our emergency management division once again, Chief Graham, Chief Ellers, Chief Slaughter, and many, many others for the great work that they did during Tropical Storm Nicole.
Mr. Margolis, anything?
Since the last time we got together, the Bluffs referendum has passed, as we all know, so I could not be more excited for that. That is going to be the first step in what will be a pretty significant project for the city over the next several months. Some things that I'll be working on with the developers team include the title commitment, which we have received. There's going to be a lot of discussion on the title work issues, issues relating to the surveys, inspections. They have to replat the property, which we'll talk about in the weeks ahead. And just a lot of other steps have to be taken on the pre-development side. So I'll be working closely with the development team on that, but very excited. Just wanted to say congratulations to everyone and say thank you to the council for the support for the project and to our voters for voting yes.
It is a monumental vote. I think it's going to be wonderful, and everybody up here really pitched in to talk to different citizens groups, and I found it ironic that the 2000 referendum lost, 66-34, and this passed 66-34. Mathematically, that's shocking. But it's also a resounding result. I really think people want to move downtown forward, and I want to thank city manager and city attorney for all the work, and the entire council, and a lot of citizens who really pitched in. It was a great team effort. So, all right, item 11.1, Councilmember Albritton, mangrove trimming.
Okay, this item I asked to put it on the work session agenda because this is something that we've been talking about probably for 15 or 16 years. I know my dad, who passed away in 2009, used to call the causeway the cave because it had mangroves grown up on both sides. He never could see the water when he drove over there. And I brought it up before I even came on council, talked to the city manager about it, and there was never any action on it. Well, John, our new city manager, has gotten a proposal from O'Neill's and some information that I wanted to read for the public. I know the council got that per email, but so here's the deal with mangroves. Mangroves are protected by state's Mangrove Trimming and Preservation Act, and enforcement of this statute has been delegated to Pinellas County. To trim mangroves, they must be in an area designated as conservation, mitigation, or preservation. A maximum of 65% of the total mangrove area may be trimmed. No mangroves may be trimmed less than a height of 6 feet. At least 25% of the mangroves in the trimmed area must have their canopies left intact. Well, now our mangroves have grown up, a lot of them, over 16 feet. And with the new state laws, we just can't go in there and cut the mangroves to have the visibility from the roadway. I know there was some pushback from people on Island Estates. At least that's what I kind of got in the past, that there were a few people that really didn't want the mangroves trimmed because they didn't want to have the noise of the traffic where they lived. I know who those people are. I've talked to them of late, and they've kind of changed their mind. They said, well, we don't have a problem with trimming them a little bit, for maybe, you could see some water through there. I know there's a lot of other species, invasive species, along the edges of the mangrove and all kind of intermixed with the mangroves that could be taken out without affecting any of the mangrove preservation acts. But of course, we don't want the mangroves to be cut down that will hinder their life or their root system, which is really good for fish and for protection of our causeway. Now here's an item I wanted to read, because one of my questions after Ian and the Sanibel Causeway got damaged, my question was, do we need to look at that for the Clearwater Memorial Causeway? If we got hit with Ian, would our causeway have been disrupted in our bridge system like Sanibel? So, Hurricane Ian overtopped the Sanibel Causeway, washing away some of the road and most of the beaches. Unlike Memorial Causeway, the Sanibel Causeway did not have riprap nor mangroves to break up the wave action and wind gusts hitting the sand on either side of the roadway. So, the mangroves form a barrier that protects our, in and out from the beach, our causeway, from damage. Now, so let me get to the, O'Neill's is a tree service here in Clearwater. Actually, they're in Ozona, but I've used them before. They're very reputable. So I asked the city manager, what if we just trim the mangroves on the south side of the causeway, not to make anybody on Island Estates upset, if we could get some visibility there as people ride on and off the beach. So the city manager asked O'Neill's for a proposal, which they gave us a very in-depth proposal. But the shocking part of it is, now that the mangroves are so high, and we have so much invasive species in there, their proposal came up to over $500,000 just to trim them. And they wouldn't even trim them down, probably in most cases where you could even see the water, because they're so high, there's a limitation that you can only trim 25% of the mangroves over 16 feet in height must be trimmed in stages so that no more 25% of foliage is removed annually. So this would be like, if we're trying to get down where you can see the water, we're going to be spending $506,000 for the first trimming, and then probably next year we'd come back and to get them down to where you can actually see. It may take 3 years. So my question is, that's not going to work, because I'm certainly not going to be happy with $500,000 for half of the causeway. And but my question is, back to the city manager, is what, and you have to be a license in cutting mangroves. You have to be a licensed prune to be able to prune them. And I know we have. Do we have licensed people working for the city of Clearwater that are, I know we have arborists, but are they licensed to trim mangroves? Do we have anybody that's, no? Jim
Mr. Halios is shaking his head now.
All right, so my suggestion is, why don't we get somebody certified in doing that, and go ahead and, I think we need a permit for this, but maybe instead of doing it all in one shot, that we put that on a work schedule. I don't know what that would cost. I'd like maybe you to look at that and see, have the city do that, where we're not spending $500,000 to do this. I still am interested in getting them cut, and it doesn't cost anything to remove the invasive species. I mean, we have, let me see here. We got Brazilian pepper trees, punk trees, and Chinese tallow. And we could pull those out within 25 feet of any mangrove
In fact, it says they must be removed within 25 feet. So we got a lot of that stuff we could probably pull out, leaving the mangroves. Is that something we could look at doing? At least get a report back to council or back to us where we can decide what the actual cost is going to be on that?
Yes, Councilmember Albritton, I've had preliminary discussions with Mr. Halios about, as a first step, taking care of the invasives. And we certainly can discuss the idea of getting someone trained for the mangrove trimming. It'd probably be more than one person, of course, but so we certainly can look into that. But we can bring you up, say in 3 months, an update.
All right. Well,
I think we need to decide whether there's support for it, though. I understand you support it.
yeah.
I don't. I just think it's a waste of money, personally. And, you know, I was around for that discussion back 15, 17 years ago. And the prices then, I think it was $250,000. So it's doubled since then. There were the folks on Island Estates that only wanted the south side. The issue is, I mean, if you look at Safety Harbor, they trim theirs along Bayshore. And it is a constant battle. Because like any plant that you trim, oftentimes it makes it even more healthy and they grow even faster once they've been pruned. I just think, you know, we'll never get it down to the point where you can see the water. Once you get to the Mandalay Channel Bridge, the mangroves are not there and you can start to see the marina and you can see the south side. But I just think there's better ways to spend money personally, and so it's not something I'm going to support. If you want to get more information, that's fine, and you may have 2 other colleagues that want to go forward with this, but I think it will be a perpetual expense, and we can use that money elsewhere for better things. I mean, if they can trim them 4 feet, you'll get at least 2 feet of growth before the next annual trimming. I mean, I think it's just a almost impossible situation. We talked about trimming some windows back 16, 17 years ago because Councilmember Hamilton brought this up and kind of like a sawtooth so that there were areas. But again, it was extremely expensive.
What about just removing the invasive species?
I don't have a problem with removing the invasive species. We did that previously. They'll just always come back, especially the Brazilian peppers. You just don't always get everything. I mean, Mr. Halios, you want to comment on that? Because once you have those invasive species, they come back.
That's correct, and, you know, going back to what you said, Mayor, the issue that we have over there is that even if we were to do that in-house with 8 urban forestry team members, you're taking them off the street for a week to 2 weeks, because you can't have volunteers out there operating saws, removing the Brazilian peppers. Then to truly get rid of the Brazilian peppers, you need to cut them down and apply a herbicide on top of them. And, you know, being that close to the water, it's a very delicate thing, and you need to have certified applicators to do that. So it's not, you know, a lot of times people will say, oh, you know, you can get a group out there to remove those Brazilian peppers and the other invasives, and it's a lot more extensive than just doing it that way. And like you said, yes, you cut it down. If you don't treat it correctly, it's going to come back, but then you're going to have to go back out there and do it again anyways. It's a catch-22.
What's the preference from the rest of the council? Anyone?
Can I ask a question? What is the ramifications of not doing anything?
Well, and to go back to what Councilmember Albritton said, it is, we do want to, you know, look at doing some things, because if you don't do anything, ideally the invasives will grow through and they'll strangle out the growth of the natural habitat that's in there. So it's a delicate balance. You know, I don't know if it's something that we dedicate every couple of years, you know, kind of like what you said, Mayor, to go in there and clear that out. maybe that's the case to do it. But, I want to discuss with Dan Mirabli from our Public Works Department what he thinks is the best, use of that resource, whether it is in-house or if it's, someone to come out and just clear out those invasives.
I just think that if there's a lot of money to ask for just for visibility, especially when it's not going to solve the problem, right? Cutting 25% of 16 feet is not going to actually solve the problem, so we're just starting this whole snowball effect. And, it does provide wind and wave protection, so I just think that it's not the solution. I don't think so. I don't mind the pruning of the invasives, because eventually, like you said, it's going to strangle the mangroves. But $500,000 for the hopes that it could be aesthetically pleasing and it's ever evolving problem, I'm not comfortable.
Well, I'm against spending that kind of money, but I'd like to get at least something back to say if we did it in-house, maybe just on the invasive species, what that cost would be.
Well, that's cost-benefit analysis, whether it's better to do it in-house or contract it out. So I'm fine with getting that information. Councilmember Bunker?
Do you have any idea how much it would cost to get people trained and certified on staff to be doing the mangrove trimming?
No, but we can look into that. Usually those certifications are minimal, a couple $100. It's just the fact of the extensiveness of having to go through it and, who really that we could designate to do that. Because it can be a pretty, kind of educational intensive experience that some of our staff are just it's not something that's in their wheelhouse.
Vice Mayor?
I agree with Councilmember Teixeira, her points. I had two comments, though. Councilmember Albritton, the section you read, are we required, Jim, we are required to remove invasives? So that's not a choice? If we have invasives in our mangroves, we're required to remove them?
I'd have to look into it. It may be a best practice, but I don't think so.
Okay.
I wouldn't think so.
Okay. And Sarah
Sarah will be able to answer that far more effectively.
If you have a mangrove trimming permit, you are required to remove the invasives. So, we're not required to remove them at this point, but if we have a permit, then we are required to remove them.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Do you have guidance now, Mr. Jennings?
Yes.
Okay.
Clear as mud. Thank you.
So we have the evaluations of the attorney and manager. We normally do that at the council meeting. At least we did. This is going to be the first time since
It's always
2020.
been on the agenda for the work session and deferred to the council meeting.
Yeah.
But in order for it to appear per your council rules, in order for it to appear at the council meeting, it has to appear on the work session
Right.
agenda.
What is your pleasure? We've normally done it at the council meeting because then, there are some people watching in here.
Let's continue with that now.
Is everyone comfortable with that?
Sure.
I'm fine.
Okay. Any new business for future agendas? Vice Mayor?
I have some. Okay. So I had brought up a discussion and an education overview of the TDC. And so I did a little research. You had asked to have me come back with some specifics. So I did a little research and, so I understand that the TDC's Tourism Development Council is an advisory board to the Board of County Commissioners. The BCC as a whole appoints individual TDC members pursuant to state law. As an advisory board to the BCC, Board of County Commissioners, the TDC as a body is tasked as follows. You meet no less than once a quarter to discuss tourism promotion related matters and make recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners related to the use and expenditures of these bed taxes or tourist development tax revenues. And so what I wanted, I still would like someone from, and it's probably from leadership of the Board of County Commissioners, about an overview of that TDC and its recommendations. What have been the recommendations in the past? What's the approval rate of the recommendations from the TDC to the Board of County Commissioners? What's their record of approval? Do you just shape it? And then, you can go online and see who makes up the board. I'd like to know, the length of time. You can probably tell me that because you're on the board. But what are the history of the allocations? And what are the obligations that are already incurred? So I went on the county website and cannot find any kind of, ledger or history about the approval of those bed taxes and what's already in the account, what's already, incurred, and then how do those discussions happen? How are the decisions, how do we expect decisions to be made about funding requests, especially from two major sports franchise, the Rays and the Phillies? Does the TDC, does the advisory committee, that advisory board really look closely at the financials of who comes before you asking for funding? Is that how it goes? Do they come before you asking for funding and you look at all these in-depth financials before you make a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners? Do you listen to presentations or proposals? Do the recommendations from the TDC go to leadership, like Barry Burton in the county first before it gets presented to the Board of County Commissioners? How transparent are those financials? And so those are, some of the questions that I have in my greater understanding of the TDC and the bed tax allocations as we go forward, and they may play a role in our Phillies discussions.
Well, they will play a role. I mean, we're all members of the TDC, and we get significant reports that are required for any capital expenditures. So at the last meeting, the Dali came forward and asked for $34 million, over a doubling of their original request for their expansion, which is 32 million. So no, it's 34. The project's 68, they're asking for 50% of the allocation from the TDC. So as I told you, the TDC pennies are very prescriptive, which is on the website.
I've got
Tells you
that too.
what each penny can be used for. 60% of the money has to go towards advertising and marketing. So the TDC makes a recommendation to the BOCC, and they ultimately make the decision. We were going to have a joint BOCC-TDC meeting, but we had the tropical storm, and so it was canceled. They're going to reschedule that, I think, after the new county commission has been seated, because it didn't make sense to do it until that occurs. But each of the organizations will have to bring full-blown plans of what they're building. They have to do feasibility studies of what the economic impact is going to be, and then the determination is made, just like occurred with the Blue Jays Stadium.
Well, in my conversations too with Mr. Jennings, I mean, we were both saying I'd like a better understanding. So I think it's reasonable to ask for a full council presentation about this, especially what the budget is and what's been, encumbered. And
well, the money is accruing right now in the capital plan because there have been no requests since the Blue Jays. We have been talking about increasing the monies that would go for beach renourishment because the Army Corps of Engineers is not allowing some of the renourishment to go forward in the Sand Key section, which goes all the way down. Most people consider Sand Key to just be in Clearwater. But when they talk about Sand Key in the greater context, it goes all the way from the Sand Key Bridge down to, I think, North Reddington Beach. And the Corps of Engineers has said they need a permanent maintenance easement signed by every single property owner if they are going to do beach renourishment and give matching funds. That isn't going to occur. There's no way that all the property owners are going to agree to that. So we have been talking about putting an extra quarter cent towards beach renourishment because we're not going to get the level of match from the federal government that we normally do. The state is still also participating, but, well, Steve Hayes would be the person. I just still don't have a list of specific questions, which is what I asked you for last time you raised this. And
Well,
then-
I did go through
Okay,
a
well,
number
if
of
you'll
questions.
forward them to Mr. Jennings, then he can forward them to Mr. Hayes. But if he doesn't know what he's answering, it makes it a little bit more difficult. And Steve is the executive director for the CVB, which is the Convention and Visitors Bureau, which is basically the staff function for the TDC.
Well, do you think it's better to have a presentation from somebody, with the county leadership,
They don't have the insight on the daily operations of the TDC. If you asked one of the county commissioners, they do not have the background that Mr. Hayes does.
I guess what I want to understand is how much weight does the TDC recommendation really carry? Because if it doesn't carry all that much, then I think a presentation from the county, who makes the decisions based on recommendations from the TDC about the funding of that bed tax, about the distribution of the bed tax. So that's what I really want to understand. How does that bed tax get distributed? Who ultimately makes the decision? I understand. Am I correct in that the TDC makes a recommendation, but it's not binding, correct?
No, but the BOCC follows the recommendation the majority of the time.
And that was one of my
And we put the
questions.
entire budget together for the TDC on how the money is expended.
Okay.
We expend it through trying to attract conventions. We go into markets domestically and globally that are feeder markets for our area. So we have several different advertising firms that we use. We also have online advertising. And then we have 2 companies that follow metrics to see where people are coming from. We tend to draw from the Midwest, Pennsylvania. Obviously, the Phillies are a part of that draw, and then New York. And then we've been getting a lot of drive business recently, going as far north as Atlanta. So that's one of the things that the TDC does. We also have a budget of up to $2.1 million for elite events, which are throughout the county. So the Grand Prix, the Valspar, the Pelican LPGA tournament, the boat races that we have, the ESPN softball tournament. Those are all in the elite event category, and the TDC supports those, along with Sugar Sands and several others throughout the county.
Great. Okay. I'll coordinate with Mr. Jennings about questions for Mr. Hayes and a presentation overview. Thank you.
Anything else? All right. Well, we'll see everybody on Thursday. We're adjourned.